Albany's Delavan House was one of the nation's most famous hotels in 1890. When fire brought it down, Union Station went up on its footprint. A series of mergers culminating in 1892 grew Thomas Edison's Schenectady Electric Company into the General Electric Company. In Troy, RPI continued to expand over the years, carving its indelible mark into the city's hillside. Rebuilds, rehabs, or urban renewal, the face of the capital region is not born, it is built. From the architect's design through the labor of the skilled tradesmen, it is a process directed by the signatory contractors, who are today members of the Eastern Contractors Association.
The most interesting things that attracted me to the association were the fact that for its history thus far, it had been a strong, active advocate for its members.
The advocacy and the beginnings of the association itself trace to circa 1890. The Albany Builders Exchange was formed, followed a bit later by similar exchanges in Schenectady and Troy. The three groups were run by the contractors and for the contractors, and were typically managed out of one of the contractors' offices with no hired staff. While they did house building plans and specifications, their primary purpose was to share information to use when negotiating. The contractors would develop agreements through various negotiation and arbitration committees. While dealing with some core issues still found in today's contracts, such as wages, hours, and jurisdictions, these early agreements were fairly simple and could be as short as one page. Just as the contractors stayed within their geographic regions, the unions did so as well. A worker in Schenectady joined the Schenectady Local, and the same was true in Albany and Troy. As transportation became easier, contractors started crossing city lines to perform work and therefore needed to have agreements with the union in the city where they were working. The early 20th century saw a number of contractors building businesses their families would carry on. Three had already been in operation for some time. Grimm Building Materials began in 1879, Callanan Road Improvement Company in 1883, and Adam Ross Cut Stone in 1889. In 1910, Anthony Mayon opened his tile shop in Schenectady. In 1912, Louis Rubin began his carpentry business in Albany that grew into Sano Rubin Construction. James H. Malloy started J.H. Malloy Contractors in 1918.
For me, one of the most important buildings, and it's been, our company has been involved with since the very beginning, was Albany Airport. Our grandfather did a project there in the 20s. I remember hearing stories about that.
Meantime, contractors were always juggling their building projects with their labor relations. Walkouts and strikes were recurrent issues. The Albany, Troy, and Schenectady Builders Exchanges would informally talk with one another on wages and other contract issues, and in 1921, formed the Tri-City Builders Exchange for some hoped-for leverage in bargaining with the tradesmen.
But they never really formalized that group. It was never incorporated. There were no officers. I think it was just a way to put them under one umbrella so that they could show, a united front when dealing with labor issues.
But those issues did not slow growth. The 20s and 30s saw the opening of more contracting firms that are still family-owned and some landmark buildings. Brothers Frank and Ray Rush began Rush Brothers General Contractors in 1922. The same year, Mary and Frank D'Agostino began D'Agostino Building Blocks. Proctor's Theater opened in Schenectady in 1926. The Alfred E. Smith State Office Building and the Albany Airport both opened in 1928. In 1930, William Keller and his wife Barbara began the William J. Keller Construction Corporation. John M. Mullins Rigging and Hauling opened for business in the Capital District in 1932. Duncan and Cal, a year later. Hudson Valley Tile opened in 1938, from which its Albany Marble Division grew. Wade Loopy began a service station in Schenectady in 1939 that would grow into a construction company after World War II. And that same year, George Martin opened his electrical contracting business. Meantime, the Albany, Schenectady, and Troy Builders Exchanges had again begun working together on contract negotiations, although they still produced separate agreements with each of the trades. In 1953, former Albany Exchange President Gerald Walbelig wrote a letter to his successor, John McManus, saying the labor negotiation process was out of date. For one thing, union demands were met far too often for management's liking. For another, the unions had professional labor negotiators, while the contractors were inexperienced in labor relations. Walbelig's words were taken to heart. By the end of that year, Leon Cromer was hired as the Albany Exchange's first labor relations director. Cromer also took on the title of managing director, and in early 1954, Albany and Schenectady agreed on a deal to allow Cromer to consult with Schenectady on jurisdictional disputes. It proved to be the beginning of a move toward a merger. The growth of the highway system was another factor.
It became much easier to get to Albany or Troy, and the other thing is the younger people, the new people came in with new ideas, and that's how it just sort of began to expand.
Cromer took the merger idea to the Albany Exchange members in 1955. In '56, a joint Albany-Schenectady committee was formed to work out the details, and a few months later, Troy was brought in. Finally, on December 4th, 1958, the three building exchanges became the Eastern New York Construction Employers Incorporated. Ansel Sweet was later elected the first president of the board.
It was an economical thing to do because they were getting bigger, and we could have a plan room and have some consultation rooms where you can negotiate. So I think it was wise that they made the move.
I don't think it was a big event that was sort of earth-shattering. It was just kind of a normal evolution of things.
Leon Cromer ended his association with Eastern New York in 1962, and Wim Van Eckeren replaced him as managing director. Van Eckeren's tenure would have its intense moments.
The intensity of activity with the association, I really think, started more in the mid-'60s as the South Mall was being built.
Governor Nelson Rockefeller's pet project changed the face of Albany's South End, the city's skyline, and the Capital District construction industry.
Outside contractors coming in and doing that larger work, and that had a big influence on what the building trades were looking for increases and collective bargaining agreements and benefits.
In 1965, the building trades walked off the South Mall job.
It was over the 7-hour day. The building trades wanted to go from 8 hours to 7 hours, and the employers were really dead set against that.
In 1967, Colton Harper came in with strong labor relations experience to replace Wim Van Eckeren as managing director. One of Harper's significant early moves was to hire Tony Carapresso as his assistant managing director.
Colton Harper was a pleasant fellow, but I think Tony really took over the load of what went on at the time.
That was Colton Harper's plan.
The first thing he asked me to do was to negotiate a Teamsters contract, and I was, to say the least, extremely apprehensive about that. Teamsters, number one. Two, he let me go in by myself.
The South Mall strike in '65 lasted 3 months and was the longest walkout in the country that year. Its effects, though, lasted longer.
As a result of that strike, the labor relations climate was fairly well strained between employers and the building trades unions. There was a lot of animosity, there was a lot of mistrust, which impacted the 1970 negotiations. We spent a lot of time down in the National Labor Relations Board. We spent a lot of time in grievances, formal arbitrations, and things of that nature.
Ultimately, ENYCE and the building trades found a way to sit down, many times just with the aggrieved parties, and find workable solutions.
Everyone was getting a fair shake and an honest count, so to speak, and I think that went a long way towards the methodologies that developed later on in settling difficulties.
In 1981, the Eastern New York Construction Employers changed its name to Eastern Contractors Association. In '83, Colton Harper retired, and his longtime assistant, Tony Carapresso, became ECA's managing director. And while tensions between the signatory contractors and unionized tradesmen began to ease, another issue was growing. Open shop contractors had opened shop in the Capital Region.
With the advent of the open shop, even though the volume increased, the share of the pie for the signatory employers became less.
Once the non-union flavor got involved, the market changed, the competition changed, And because of that, both the management and labor, they had to change.
The signatory contractors and the trades were able to change their approaches to the collective bargaining process and bring some stability to labor relations. It was one of many changes at ECA and in the industry.
There weren't any computers.
I remember that.
You multiplied with rollover machines that did the multiplying.
I do remember there weren't computers.
There were no copy machines either.
Right.
Then technology changed the rules.
Everything is quicker, faster. You know, the pneumatic tools, for one, you know, the hammer's going the way of the dinosaur.
But the main change, I think, over my career, over my father's career, has been the speed of communication. Used to take paper going back and forth for 2, 3, 4 weeks. Now it's 2 days to review and approve an order.
We're seeing a big shift in the way buildings are being designed now. We're not seeing so much the red brick that and you and I, grew up.
Precast.
We're seeing now the other trades becoming more a part of our organization.
The changes are the precast. The industry has changed with, the green, everything green. You can't get any greener than masonry. So, the restoration is picked up where the brickwork has fallen.
A lot of the labor rules went by the boards. Most of it, I can point to Eastern Contractors and say they played a vital part in all of this.
Probably the most significant thing that I can think of is the degree of cooperation that's developed, which continues to provide our employers with the opportunity to be as competitive as they can be.
Construction equipment is akin to a car with air conditioning, radios, and global positioning. Back when I started, it was there was no such thing as a woman on the job.
Women in construction, it's a hard avenue. There's many women in the industry, and they're very successful at it.
One of the early ones was Hannah Callanan, who took over the family business in 1896 after the death of her husband.
He died of a heart attack, leaving Hannah with 6 children and this brand new company that she needed to decide what she was going to do. And she toughed it out. She decided she was going to run this company.
But not without further crisis. 3 days after Christmas in 1902, the plant burned down. While people told her to sell, Hannah rebuilt.
So she and her oldest son kept going on. But then a couple more years later, there's an explosion. Her 2 oldest sons died, 21 other employees died, and here she is still with this young company, but she continued fighting forward and brought it to where it is today, 100 and some years later. You have Rose Loopy with Wade Loopy Construction. Contractors have great stories that if you wanted to get paid, you had to go face the music with her because she was going to make sure that everything was done the way she wanted it to be done before she was going to cut you a check. Now we have Lisa Henderson with Duncan & Cow, who's the president of that company. She's probably the only female GC in the area doing general contracting work.
In 2001, Henderson became the first female board president at ECA.
To be on board at Eastern Contractors, to me, it was my profession. I didn't think about the fact that I was a woman coming on board.
Bridget Hubble at Burt Crane also grew up with a family business. She went to school to be a civil engineer, went out and worked for a national company for years, for probably 8 or 9 years or so. And then she's come back home, and now she's the CEO of that company here. Bobby Young even started her business from scratch. Her husband's a very skilled tradesman, and they decided that's what they wanted to do. So, she went and started that company, and they're very successful now. So we do have these great women that have worked in the industry over the years, and some great stories. My favorite is the one about Hannah Callanan, and they're not to be forgotten.
At the outset, ECA supported its member contractors in collective bargaining, labor relations, apprenticeship training, and dispute resolution. Then it began an expansion of its services.
The focus shifted from being pretty much 99% business-oriented to recognizing that we are also an association and need to provide other services.
Carapresso served as president of the International Foundation of Employee Benefit Plans that provides educational opportunities for trustees and administrators of various types of benefit plans. ECA's strong connection to the foundation continues.
The executive committee and the board of directors has felt that that's an important part of what we do. We appoint trustees to somewhere around 25 to 30 individual plans. representing tens of thousands of participants that are employed in the construction community in upstate New York.
In 2005, Todd Helfrich succeeded Tony Carapresso as ECA Managing Director and continued adding value to ECA membership.
I had some background in bringing an online plan room up and running in Rochester. We were able to bring that to the membership in the Capital District.
Benefit plans, professional training, and collaborations with other labor organizations continue to expand, where ECA sees an opportunity to enhance its offerings to its members. And social opportunities have increased as well.
ECA and Todd recognizes that it's good to have events, social events, get-togethers, whatever, where you can have fun.
ECA is a full-service association for its contractor members, and importantly, it has created an atmosphere in which the contractors and the tradesmen can more effectively work together.
I always appreciated ECA being there because it organized the contractors in a sense. So it really gave a consistent, central place to discuss issues that affect both the contractors and their employees in the field.
They're truly partners. Do we have disagreements? Absolutely, everybody does, and it's healthy. Disagreements are very healthy, but and the bottom line is that at the end of the day, we are true partners. We have to be.
I can't emphasize enough the role of providing an environment of labor peace and a place to go to negotiate and discuss and collaborate with the building trades.
It's kind of like the type of thing you don't know what you have until you don't have it. And when if you can't get those guys when you have a problem, you realize how much you rely on them.
Continue to have the relationship we have with the building trade so that we can focus on recapturing whatever markets we need to recapture, especially in the private sector.
So we don't have a collective bargaining relationship, at least, with the plumbers or the electricians or the sheet metal workers. I would hope that over time we can build a stronger, more codified relationship with those unions.
I'd like to see it go back to more collaboration between regions and really be a leader in that.
Well, I hope that they can increase their sphere of influence. Just being in the Albany Capital District area isn't enough anymore.
And as the signatory contractors expand their businesses into new markets, they do so in tandem with ECA.
We are going to continue to represent our members wherever they go, continue to grow based on the strong foundation we have over time.